Go ahead and log in.
Not as cool as the last one.
What was the, oh yeah. All right, review question. Whose creeper head was that? Who can name that from the last thumbnail when we're doing finishing up consequentialism, utilitarianism? We had the look like the crypt keeper's head right next to a book. For 5 points, favor with the Lord. Who can answer? Yes.
Bentham?
Jeremy Bentham. Yay. The seculars' relics, right? Because atheists and secularists are religious too, and they believe in relics. Just look at Jeremy Bentham's head. All right, go ahead and log in, say hi in the chat, know that you're here. We finished up consequentialism, various critiques of that, if I just had to summarize. There's not a good methodology for determining what optimific is. What is optimific? Optimific is the balance of the greater what? Overall benefits versus drawbacks. There's no way of determining that, especially for more complicated situations. 2, the standards are too high. We're not all saints the way we are. We're saints. Hey, Carol. But you know what I'm saying? There's no room for supererogation was one of the terms. That means I can't take my wife out for dinner in the movie because I'm falling short of what? Feeding and giving all my money to people more in need. Number 3 problem. It treats all people equally when they shouldn't be treated equally. Because we have a notion of equality, but then we're like, yeah, but it's kind of weird when I'm treating complete strangers absolutely equal to my own family members, right? It means I'm neglecting. So there's something improper about that. Prioritization. You want me to hand that over to them?
Yeah.
All right, Team B, you sign your names here. Not only that, another problem that we identified, this particularly comes into veganism, is that you would have to treat all sentient beings. Sentience is the ability to be conscious, aware, feel pain equally, and we've identified, well, that seems to be problematic too. If you believe that obviously human beings are higher in dignity too, and we'll get into this when we get into Kant, than animals, while at the same time saying, sure, I have a duty to treat animals well, I don't see animals and people as equal. That was the 3rd problem. 4th problem with consequentialism, no intrinsic right or wrongness. You might have a problem with that. Why? Nothing's intrinsically right or wrong. Everything's just determined by the consequences. And as you'll see in chapter 12, it actually brings up with the Kantian consequentialism an argument, what is as a critique of utilitarianism. Is slavery always wrong? Well, if I can make, ideally for a utilitarian, so just take something you're like, yeah, objectively, I would say that's definitely wrong. Pick whatever you want. The point of the matter is that the Kantian deontological ethicist is going to critique utilitarians. Why? They're going to pick things that you just know are wrong, objectively. But guess what? In utilitarianism, slavery isn't always wrong. Torture is not always wrong. Eating people is not. Doing the Jeffrey Dahmer is not always wrong. Why? There is no intrinsic right or wrongness. If it ends up that overall there's more benefits to enslaving groups of people, then, well, gosh dang it, if you're utilitarian, you got to go that way, right? Sure, there's some negative drawbacks. I'm sure they don't like it too much, but there's no intrinsic right or wrongness. It's better for society. What did I tell you? Most politics are determined. Can we think about in World War II, any groups or nations, states that were like, obviously this is the optimistic way to, I'm sure my enemies aren't going to like this, but overall, I'm going to make a better world. We talked about also, you see in movies, we saw Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Why'd you guys think he was so bad? He was just being a good utilitarian. He just wanted what was best overall versus drawbacks. Sure, if he had to wipe out a planet because they didn't, then that's what required? So another critique. That's called the Guardians of the Galaxy 3 critique of utilitarianism. You can write that in your notes. The problem of injustice. Now they're going to be, this is what we call ad hoc. Ad hoc is when you add something just to rescue your position, right? Let's say you're critiquing my position. I'm like, well, what if I told you that doesn't work because I have a yellow cloth? And the yellow cloth, this is what it reminds me of, like kids, right? They're having this argument where they were like, my powers will beat your powers, right? And then what does the other kid do? Well, they can't because I just have this power blocking cloth that and they're like, oh yeah? Well, then I've got the laser eye destroying power blocking cloth eyes. And I put right in there, you know what I'm talking about, right? This is ad hoc. Well, philosophers do the same thing, just kind of at an adult level. Oh, dang, yeah, that is a devastating critique of my position. But what if I said, I do have intrinsic value? Justice is all. Because remember, there is no anything that's just or there's no intrinsic. So they just add an ad hoc. Well, I'm just going to put it into my system and add it in that it is. Well, that's ad hoc. Justice is never optimistic, says. How do you know that? Well, because I made it up. You see, I just added it in because it protects my system. So further problems with utilitarianism. So let's get another perspective. Let's get how many people we have in the chat? 33? 32? Yeah. 33 is the secret Mason number. And we don't want that. These two systems are in terms of contemporary ethics, diametrically opposed. So let's look at the Kantian perspective. Any questions before we begin? Share screen. Can you see, is it black? Is it showing up on there? Is it showing? Because when I switch, it will go. We're all good? Yeah. All right. I'm going to start with a story. Imagine a person who reasons as follows. I should keep my money rather than pay it out in taxes. Probably know a couple of those, right? Because if I keep it, I'll be able to afford a wonderful vacation for myself and my family. Okay? And no one is actually going to suffer if I pocket the money, all right? Since it's only a few $1,000s we're talking about. There's no way that money could bring as much happiness in the government's hands as it could mine. Well, it's kind of a utilitarian, right? Well, overall, then I'm like, what's it really going to do? I mean, it's better that I. So suppose he's right. He spends the money on a vacation. He and his family have a terrific time and are never caught. Do you think he's done something wrong? The author says still he has done something wrong. So as the person who cheats on the exams and gets away with it. Obviously not my class because I've installed spyware. I can watch you and everything you do. I was joking with you guys actually believe it? I got a student last year because I know that like half of you, and look, I'm not your mom and dad. I'm not going to parent you. You don't want to pay attention in class, it's on you. You get the consequentialism. What happens? But I do know that half of you are probably on your computers not paying attention in class, doing other stuff, right? So I brought this up to one class to like, and so I was telling them, basically giving them a lecture. I'm like, you do whatever you want. I'm not going to like ensure that, oh, you're looking on the web at something else. And it is difficult. Philosophy is difficult. If you have your attention divided, you're not going to get, I can't even do, think about how good I am at philosophy. I can't have the TV on or be doing something when I'm reading philosophy. It's too difficult. I have to have my undivided attention, so even more so for you. But you're free. Remember, the professor doesn't think that autonomy is an absolute, but he does respect autonomy at some level, some sort of virtue. And so I'm giving you autonomy. You're free to even do the wrong thing. So I was giving a lecture to class about this last year, and I'm like, I know you're all on there because I've installed that camera spying device where I can watch. And half the class actually fell for it. They're like, what? I'm like, oh, come on. As my wife says, you just can't be a serious person, can you? I'm like, hey, baby. The most serious, unserious person I know. All right. So you know I'm joking with you, right? I would never install spyware in your computer. So how was it? How was the movie you were watching? Creeper. Professor may be many things, but he's not a creeper. Why? Because he respects autonomy at some level. All right. So the person who gleefully speeds down the emergency lane, yeah, I know that, and escapes the traffic jam, and the rest of us have to be stuck in. We don't really have that problem here in Helena, right? When I lived in California, that was, it's like, man, lane's so bad. And there's one guy that actually is, I actually kind of morally applauded it, those sorts of people in my heart. I was like, there's a brave man. God bless. God, thank you for your service, right? That's what I felt like saying when you had the courage to do it where no other man would go into the lane. But maybe we admit, look, you can't really do that. Why? Do you think that those are wrong? So again, the counter argument would be consequentialism, but intuitively, the author is putting up the fact that, but we do hold that that's wrong, despite whether they get caught or not. And we'll talk about the ring of Gyges. There's a story in Plato where you put a ring on it, you turn invisible. And the idea behind that is it would reveal your moral character because you basically do whatever you want and not get caught. So you're doing things in terms of the consequences or because there's something that's intrinsically right and wrong. That's what the whole point here. Well, Kant's one of these dudes that thinks utilitarianism consequences is wrong and that there was actually something intrinsically good versus bad. That it's not just, it's not right whether you get caught or not, or whether it benefits anybody, the government overall, and you'd actually get more benefits. I feel like my parents were Kantians now that I'm thinking about like stuff that my parents would say to me. If I was smart as a kid, I would have been like, that's a bunch of Kantian garbage, Mom and Dad, and I reject your ad hoc. But that didn't come later in life. Okay. So does everybody get what's being set up? The idea of Kantian deontological ethics is going to argue perhaps actions are wrong because they are inconsistently unfair. Oh, we haven't got to this yet. Consistency and fairness. Okay, let's look at those examples that we were given. In each case, people are making exceptions of themselves, right? Do as I say, not as I do. But has anybody ever had this experience? Be like, really, maybe it's taxes. Well, I'm not going to put that on because we're live. You dox yourself. The IRS would be swooping down on your apartment in a little bit. But it's like, hey, nobody's going to get hurt. It's a victimless crime, you see. And I'm going to benefit. I'm sure we've all kind of reasoned and justified our way. But the idea is like intuitively you know it's wrong. Why? It's not fair. It's not. So let's look at these cases. The tax cheats and the dirty politicians, they're all in the same boat as the rest of us, right? There's kind of an inconsistency, right? Wait a minute. Why do you get to do it and I don't? I have to think about this in terms of grading. I'm going to have students occasionally come to me. I've done wrong on my exam. I'm so sorry. Can you give me another chance? Can you give me extra credit? Now, what is it that I have to actually think about? As a professor, consistency and fairness. I have to think about the rest of you, right? Suppose it was you that asked me that. Don't I have to think about the rest of... Do you think he should get a privilege over and above the rest of you? Not unless he pays me money. That's right. That's the right answer. No. You would feel there's something unfair about that, correct? Well, wait a minute. Why does he get that? Why do I have to work hard on the exam? And he gets a second chance. That's not fair. And you're not being consistent, professor, because you said this and now you're doing something else. So I have to think about that too. I want the best for you, but I have to be consistent and fair in my grading. So maybe those examples show that those aren't consistent and fair. Maybe a test for that is, look at here, 1 and 2. What if everyone did that? What if everybody cheated on their taxes? What if everybody fill in the blank? This is what I'm telling you. I'm convinced my parents were Kantian. Maybe your parents were Kantians too and they didn't even know it. Have you ever heard your parents say ask these two questions to you as growing up? What if everybody did that? If everybody jumped in the fire, would you? I'm like, probably. Are we talking everybody here? Literally everybody, mom and dad, were jumping in the fire? Depends on how much I've had to drink, right? I thought I was invincible because I drank. Like, of course I could jump through that fire. Or have your parents ask you this question: how would you like it if I did that to you? Or somebody did that. Have you ever heard that from your parents? If so, maybe your parents were Kantians and didn't know it. Well, we ask those questions in the face of a bully, a liar. What if somebody beat up on you? Oh, it's okay to lie. Yeah, but what if everybody lied to you? We're trying to, when we ask those people those questions, we're trying to figure out, are you being consistent? Or are you a hypocrite? And are you being fair? That's what those questions are supposed to. Both raise issues of fairness, but neither provides a foolproof test for moral actions. Moving back, let's just see what people are doing in the. Consider the first question. What if everybody did that? So the question is supposed to show if disastrous results would occur if everyone did X, then X is immoral. If everyone used emergency lanes and traffic jams, then ambulances and fire trucks would often need to provide additional need and leaving many to die. Do you see? Can we think of another example? Well, what if everybody did that? So, throwing trash. Let's go. Tiny piece of paper. Somebody's like, well, what if everybody did that? You live in a trash bin. Oh, yeah. All right. It would lead to disastrous results. Yes.
Wasn't there like an argument against this earlier in the book where they're like, well, if everyone were to be celibate, that would be sustainable.
Yeah.
Or celibacy is morally wrong.
Yeah. So exactly. That's a great objection too. That's the objection I was just thinking of. So no, that can't solely be the measure of a moral, if an action's moral or not, because we have things that we would say are certainly morally acceptable, but we know if everybody did that, it would lead to disastrous consequences. Now, maybe the issue with that is because things are nuanced, shocker, right? Maybe people are called to different things in life. I mean, I'll tell you it would be a disaster. What if everybody became a philosopher? Philosophy professor. Would it have disastrous results? We wouldn't be able to eat or do. I mean, they'd have to take on another career, but like, I could think of a lot of good things. What if everybody became an engineer? And there were no doctors. Well, you die. And you're dead. You die. Yes.
Wouldn't there just be like there would never really be resolution if everybody was philosophers? It would just be like ongoing debate.
Could be.
Discussion.
That's why we need tyranny. At some point, we just need to be like, I don't care what your argument is. I'm both morally superior to you and intellectually. I'm not going to argue that, but you do what I say, right? Doesn't totalitarianism seem good? Hey, man. You have everybody arguing with each other. Somebody's got to like bring these philosophers in. I don't know. Like, I think philosophers would probably be smart enough, hopefully, to figure out, be like, well, look, debate's good and everything, and we can have that, but at some levels, we're gonna have to practically agree to get some stuff done because we're starving and hungry. All right, good questions. But it's interesting, it has homosexual sex here. And that's interesting because I have seen the argument, what's like, well, if everybody was engaged in that, then we would have no what? Nobody would be children, right? So that's interesting. So going back to the two issues, you have celibacy, which is in one sense considered a virtue, and then homosexuality that would be like considered a vice. That the homosexual action, saying people, but because it's actions that are you're judging, right? Action of abstaining from sex, the action of what people would call unnatural sex. So, wait a minute, both have disastrous consequences, everybody did it. Why is one being considered a vice, immoral, and one not? One's actually praised as immoral and the other one's. That's a good question. How would you answer that? Well, however you're going to answer, it's going to be a little bit more than just because it's going to have. How about that? I can't just say just because something's going to have disastrous consequences if everybody would do it. That can't be the sole reason. But it's got to be a factor, right? Because I do have that in my reasoning. There's certain things that I wouldn't do because if it has disastrous consequences, that's part of but I don't reduce it to simply as a utilitarian. And I think that's something that we've seen in ethics. What are the problems? It's when you take a factor and make it a piece and make it the whole, right? And try to reduce it. Yeah, sometimes I think about consequences. And I make a pros and cons. Sometimes I do think about disastrous consequences. I don't build my whole philosophy on it. How about that? Now, Kantian's going to give you a way out of it. If you were Kantian, you would just be like, well, because there's something intrinsic, because I don't have a problem saying some things are intrinsically bad and good. So you'd say homosexual sexual actions are intrinsically disordered or bad, and celibacy is intrinsically good. A Kantian would have a way out of that, whereas a consequentialist maybe couldn't, is the idea. And that's kind of what we're looking at, these different ethical paradigms. How do they answer certain questions? They answer them differently, right? Depending on what ethical paradigm you have. And then we look at the strengths and weaknesses. How do we do that? Well, here's an advantage. That's what we always start with. The advantage of this theory, and then what? The disadvantages. And then you have to actually think through it yourself, given the kind of pros and cons of each theory. Right now, we're doing the Kantian. We're going to think about the pros in light of the cons of utilitarianism, and then we're going to critique Kant. Isn't that cool? My favorite part. All right. So that is one issue that they're bringing up, though. The real problem for this test, apart from the fact that it sometimes delivers mistaken verdicts, is that it makes morality and action depend on how it's described. Suppose sexual relations of a gay couple were described as having consensual, enjoyable sex. In that case, the actions would pass the test, but that undermines the test because it shows that the test yields contradictory results. The very same action said to both be morally wrong and morally acceptable. Interesting point. Depending on how it's described. So it's an issue of the description. Without an independent guidance on how to select one description over another, the test cannot do the job it was supposed to do. Namely, and the test is, what if everybody did that? So if you were a smart kid, you could tell your parents, be like, oh, come on. Unless you have a prior theory, mom and dad, to give accurate description of why action would be intrinsically right or wrong, your semantic sorcery and word wizardry is not going to work on me, mom and dad. Could we have said that? What about the other test? I would think too, and I've been thinking about this too from the religious aspect, because this comes up, that there's one, St. Paul talks about in one particular context, it would be better if you weren't married or something like that. I'm not sure we read that that's generally the case, that it's a morally superior. I think it depends, like a lot of things. So at least in Orthodoxy, there's a lot of these kind of debates going on, whether it's actually a higher calling or actually just a different calling. I would tend to think that, from my understanding, they're both equal in dignity. The married life and the celibate life. And it might be good for one person, it may not be good for the other, right? So I'm not convinced yet that, at least within Orthodoxy, that the celibate life is even higher than the married life. Anyways, just to answer. And if you look at the Bible too, it's particular context addressing particular people, which you see Paul. So I don't think we can universally say, from a Christian's perspective, celibacy is just like it is good, but I don't know if it's superior to the married life. Although, the counter argument from Orthodoxy would be, who's the highest saint in Roman Catholicism and Orthodoxy? Anybody? Highest saint. I'll give you a clue, it's a woman. Mary. Who is solid, ever virgin Mary. So the counter argument is, yeah, but look at the highest among us, the best par excellence is Mary. And she chose, as scripture says, the good part of not the married life. So it's a difficult debate, but anyways, I don't want to go too far off on this. Let's go into the second test. The golden rule. Have anybody heard of this? What's the golden rule? Can somebody state that? Yes.
Like, just treat others the way you want to be treated.
What do we think about that? Pretty good rule? How would you like it if I did that to you? So the direct application of the golden rule. Treat others as you would want to be treated. Classic test for morality. The golden rule test. What is it supposed to show? Consistency. You're not acting consistent if you're doing one thing. For example, you wouldn't want to be slandered or exploited, then don't do such things to others. If you do them anyways, you see you're acting inconsistently, hence unfairly and therefore immorally. What's the note here that I have? Well, if I was going to push back, because I always like to push the question mark down far enough, because it sounds pretty good, right? It's like, yeah. I have a note here. Why is inconsistency immoral? If I was the opponent, I'd ask that. Who cares? Why not be inconsistent? Like, what does inconsistency have to do with morality? It's not self-evident, is it? So something to think about. And that's what you want to do when you're reading through the text, right? If I was the opponent, what I would say. How would I object? Okay. Getting people to imagine what it would be like to switch places with others for the intended victim is often a very effective way to convey a moral message. That is why films and literature are often such powerful tools, right? For moral education. But imagine filling someone else's shoes and asking yourself whether you would accept being treated in a certain way is actually an unreliable test of morality. And if that's the case, the golden rule cannot be correct. Now, it's interesting because sometimes people think that Kant's the one that advocating the golden rule, and he's actually the one saying no. Simply putting yourself into the shoes is an unreliable way. Why? Anybody remember? Yes.
I know one thing you're saying is like, what if there is someone who enjoys like feeling pain?
Oh, yeah, mask.
That doesn't make hurting, like
Yeah.
that person, that would make hurting other people like
Or didn't we bring up that people put out ads to be like tortured, or like they go to the doctor and they're going to become an amputee or something like that? How would you like it? Everybody did that too. It's like that's what they want. You just be like, they're crazy. They're insane. All right. But Kant's not actually saying the golden rule. And the reason why is the golden rule makes morality depend on emotions, personal desires. Most of us don't like to be hit, and so the golden rule forbids us from hitting others, which is what it brings up. Yeah, but what does it say about masochists? They enjoy being hit. The golden rule allows them to go around hitting others. That's bad. That's one. But what we're going to see too is that Kant is going to be adamant of making morality as objective, independent of your feelings. Because it's the duty, it's what's right, it's intrinsic. It doesn't matter what I feel about it. And that's the problem. Although psychologically it might be motivating, or you can get people to do stuff. Hey, well, think about how you feel. That doesn't answer, yeah, but is it right or wrong, is what Kant's. In fact, he's going to construct a whole system that's very rational. Because he thinks, you know what messes things up? Emotions and personal desires. And so if we can have a formulaic way, a good objective theory where I don't have to depend on my emotions and let them cloud and mess things up, then so much the better. So Kant develops something of a rule. By the way, it says the golden rule also fails to give us guidance on self-regarding actions. You know what that is? Yeah, but there's stuff that only pertains to me. How am I going to apply the golden rule? How would you like it if everybody did? It's like, yeah, but this action is solely about me. You're just in a different category at that point. So that's another failure of the golden rule. In Kant's time, self-regarding views were widely endorsed. Many people still think, for instance, there's something immoral about suicide or letting one's talents go to waste, even if no one else is harmed in the process. So Kant realized that, and so he's going to develop a rule that's going to get over those challenges. The principle is called principle of universalizability. Can you say that real fast? Universalizability. I'm going to go up to so fast food today and be like, one order of universalizability in a large, what? And put some of that categorical imperative on there too. And see what happens. Well, Kant, like most, felt the appeal the two tests discussed. He agreed that common sense is deeply committed to the importance of fairness and consistency. So yes, he does understand that. But his aim was to identify the ultimate principle of morality, one that would explain the attraction of the two tests while correcting their shortcomings. And this is the principle of universalizability. An action is morally accepted if and only if its maxim is universalizable. All right, somebody tell me what a maxim is. So on page 163 of your textbook, what is a maxim? Somebody tell me, what's the definition of a maxim? Nobody has their books with them?
The principle of an action, do yourself and do something.
Yes. All right. What's the example? Something about $50. You send a regular check to Oxfam. No, that's incorrect. Your maxim might be contribute $50 per month to Oxfam to help reduce hunger. A maxim has two parts then. It states what you are to do and why you're about to do it. And you dictate your own maxims. In other words, the rules that you live by. You ever heard somebody criticize somebody that say, you're not a person of integrity? Why did Randy Marsh make Integrity Farms in South Park? To make money? Well, his whole thing was they have integrity, right? He has a maxim that he lives by and other people don't. Okay. Kant thought that every action has a maxim. Of course, we don't always formulate maxims in these terms that are clear to ourselves prior to acting, but that's what we usually use and say, you're not a person of integrity because you don't follow you're not a principled person. Have you ever heard that? Versus this man's a principled man. They follow on their maxims and the other person doesn't. Whenever you act, you intend to do something, you have a reason for doing it. Now that's going to come up over and over in Kant. A reason for action. That something ought to be reasonable. Maxims are what you would cite there for when we try to explain or you explain to others, why are you doing that? Well, because, and then you cite your maxim. And if you lack a maxim, what does it say? Then we aren't really acting at all. We could be moving our bodies as we do, or sneeze, or roll across the bed in our sleep, but the absence of maxim in these cases shows that these are mere bodily movements. They don't have a reason. They don't have a maxim. In this case, they're unreasonable. They're involuntary. And Kant wants a reason for this. And the rightness or wrongness of an action depends on your maxims. And that leads us to a really important point, at least for Kant. For Kant, the morality of our actions has nothing to do with the results. Isn't that interesting? It has everything to do with your intentions and the reasons for actions. That is a clear break from consequentialism. Right? All right, let's look at now, we say that maxim is universalizable if one's goals could be achieved in a world in which everyone acted on the maxim. I might, for instance, that I keep my promises to you because I think it's right to do so. But I might instead keep my promises because I want you to like me, or you leave your fortune to me in your will. Assume that these different reasons don't change the results of my promises. Then the utilitarian thinks that each case of promise keeping is equally good. Now, we've brought this up before. There's what's on the surface seems to be good actions, right? Feeding the poor and the hungry, being nice and courteous to each other. Problem with consequentialism is it doesn't take into account intentions. I'm only nice to you because I want something. I only give to the poor, say, not because I care anything about, because I care what you, that's like the politician, right? Or the rich business owner. Oh, they're philanthropists. Why do you think that they're philanthropists? Because they really care about us, plebs? It's virtue piety signaling, isn't it? Oh, I want to be seen as. I just watched Tommy Boy. And there's the competitor, right? I forget his name, the auto owner. Zelensky, that's right. He's like, yes, betcha, there I'm a working man, and I'm for the working man. And he gives money to, why? Is he really for the working man? Does he care for the working man? It's a con. It's all piety, virtue. Oh, wow, he's just like one of us. They use this in Montana politics all the time, right? He's a farmer just like one of us. I can't believe people fall for any of these lines whatsoever. And maybe it's because we're being trained in philosophy to be suspicious. But I'm like, come on. An honest politician, first of all. But all of these are supposed to be like, it doesn't matter the actions, but the intentions. This is something that Kant's going to bring up. And Kant's just like one of us. That's how come we know he's dry. Because he says what I say. I should make my own commercials, huh? And you got to do like just like I did. All right. All right, well, let's see how this relates to whether our maxims are universalizable. Okay, let's say I admit, Kant, it's not simply the results. It's not simply the action, but being done for the right reasons. This supports our thought that those who set out to do evil are acting immorally. Why? The intention. By the way, I've heard this a million times. Someone who's like, well, my intentions were good. I was trying to help. I'm like, you're an idiot. My car's all smashed up. What do you mean you're trying to help? I was just trying to do the right thing. The road to hell is paved with what? Yeah, I can't believe people still use that excuse, but I was trying to do something good. Sure. So here's an example where intentions matter and don't matter, right? Obviously, if you're like, I was trying to do wrong, I wanted to smash your car up. It's like, yeah. That clearly does. The intention was relevant, and that's what made it evil. So what if I was trying to do something evil and it turned out to have good results? You'd be like, you're still bad, right? Just happenstance. They managed to produce something good. Also, it just has a claim that people who live by a noble principle are acting morally, right? Even when they have some unforeseen accident, unforeseeable accident intervenes, their action brings only bad results, right? So this is the flip side, to kind of counter the argument, say like, but good intention would matter here, right? Because I was trying to, now I brought up that example because the reason why the good intention by itself doesn't matter is because of issues of negligence. If you were negligent, so good intentions really do matter. But if you were negligent, good intentions couldn't ride you through, right? Be like, but I was trying to do right, but you shouldn't have. You were negligent in the way that you handled the situation. So good intentions are not going to win the day. However, as we see, if certain things are beyond my control, as it says unforeseen, but the good intentions would matter. That's what we call a principled person, a noble principle for acting, even regardless of the negative effects or consequences that would happen. All right. So we've gotten so far, some actions we see would be bad. Some maxims would be bad, and some would be good. So we need a way of formulating. The good ones from the bad ones, right? So far we're just seeing how maxims would generally relate. Now I need to be like, yeah, but there's probably bad maxims and good maxims. How do I tell? Well, that's where universalizability comes in. Well, my next question, how do I know when it's universalizable? There's 3 tests. Formulate your maxim clearly. So a lot of problems in philosophy is that we don't formulate things clearly, meaning the words. Where we talked about, even in consequential, have a plan, be clear about it, and then execute it or something like that. Similar here, state what you intend to do and why you intend to do it. That reveals you're being thoughtful. You're not careless, right? Well, I didn't think about it. It just happened. So you have a maxim that's well thought out and defined. 2, imagine a world in which everyone supports and acts on your maxim. And 3, then ask, can the goal of my action be achieved in such a world? If so, if you answer all 3 and only you have to have all 3, then it's universalizable. Does that make sense? So look at this. The test for maximum universalizability clearly echoes the rule of consequences test for an optimistic social rule. What if everyone did this? Kant has us ask a version of that question. This is the second step. But unlike the other tests, Kant doesn't ask about whether people would be better off in such imagined world, or about whether the disaster would strike there. Instead, he asks about whether we could achieve our goals in that world. Why? Why is that important? If our maxim is universalizable, then we're pursuing actions for reasons that everyone could get behind. So it has nothing to, or very little to do with the consequences. For Kant, morality based, right, and if a maxim's universalizable is unlike the utilitarian who believes there's no intrinsic right or wrongness determined by whether the acts or the consequences are optimistic. Kant says there is. It's your duty. And what's a duty? It's a rule. A law, a moral law that's objective. Well, what is a law? It has a conditional. If X, then Y. Well, moral laws, if X, then do Y. Now you got to make this a universal because law is a universal. That means it applies to all. So for example, let's just take the light. If the light turns red and you're in your car, you do what? Then you stop. So notice that's a rule. And it becomes a law when it's for everybody. Obviously, I can't say, like, yeah, but that doesn't apply to professors, you see. It's like, no, everybody. So the reason why Kant's asking the question is, can you imagine a world in which everyone supports and acts on your maxim is not because what would happen, disastrous consequences or good consequences, but is it universally accepted? Because a duty, a moral law must be law-like. It must be universalizable. And so that's why he's asking it. So if it is, it doesn't matter if it has bad consequences or not. It's your duty to do it anyways. Now, the reason why this is really important, I've noticed that almost all the contemporary debates, political debates, I told you, are utilitarian. Gun rights. The anti-gun lobby, what's their position? There's people out there that don't think either that we should have more limited access to guns or that guns should be completely banned. Why? Why do those people think that? Come on, you know the answer. These people think this because
I think guns do more damage than good.
So, what ethical position would you say they probably are in? What can't? Consequentialist. It doesn't matter. They don't believe. Is there anything intrinsically wrong with taking people's rights to gun ownership? No, everything's determined in terms of consequences. Kantian would be like, who cares? So the upshot is, first of all, if it's a constitutional right, it doesn't matter. The consequences, you don't determine the moral action or legal action on the consequences. I mean, suppose this is an offensive argument. It's not mine, but I can imagine somebody doing it. What if somebody picked certain ethnic groups and be like, yeah, we can lower gun crime. These ethnic groups don't get guns. Do you think the anti-gun lobbyists would be like, oh, awesome. We found a way to lower. Well, wait a minute. If you're a consequentialist, isn't it just the numbers that matter? Oh, now you're a Kantian. Oh, but that's not equitable. That's not fair. By the way, that's a good way to show somebody's actually inconsistent. If you're all about just the optimistic, we could do certain things to lower crimes, to bring about world peace, to, I don't know, give me another political, to end poverty, I don't know.
World hunger.
World hunger. That all of a sudden you're not going to be a consequentialist anymore, but you can't do that because it would require injustice. Oh, so now there's something intrinsically called unjust. But a hypocrite, you could say to the person. You can't have your cake and what camp are you in? Yeah, this person says, I mean, heck, you can tell the consequentialist that says end racism. I think Hitler tried to end racism by having what? One race. That's one way to go. Oh, I'm not a consequentialist anymore because I don't like it. Then you're inconsistent. Not this. You support that position, but you're showing you're just being inconsistent with your philosophy and ethics. All right. Capital punishment is another one. Some groups are asking capital punishment's a deterrent. Kantian would say, I don't care if it is or not. There's something objectively just, and it talks about this right here, lex talionis. Is the Latin eye for an eye, like justice required. There's something that's objectively right. Hey, great, if it curbs violence, it's a deterrent, that's icing on the cake. But I don't do things simply based on the consequences. Abortion would come up. Oh, but if you ban women from having an abortion, they're just going to do what? It's a consequentialist, right? Oh, first of all, I don't know how you're determined. Like, if I were you, I'd be like, yeah, well, what number? Like, how are you going to determine? You could also be like, well, shoot. If we don't make safe bank robberies, people are going to get shot. If we don't legalize bank robberies, people are just going to take guns and rob banks. And so I'm a consequentialist. I think the optimistic is we have safe, what's the other word? So they would say safe and effective bank robberies. I mean, who's with me on this? Who wants to get rich? Come on. I'd make a utilitarian argument. I'd be like, come on. Maybe you go to Kantian, be like, bank robberies are objectively wrong. Abortion's objectively wrong. It's objectively right to have justice or something. Like what? Fill whatever you're in, whatever political or moral issue. The idea is you're starting to see what the Kantian deontological ethicists would argue. Like, it's the rejection of consequentialist ethics. So I just wanted to bring that up because I wanted to show you how actually prevalent utilitarianism is, and people don't even know it. They don't know how much they are utilitarians. And if there's anything we learn about in today's class, Kant hates utilitarians. Right? All right, questions? What's going on in the chat here? Whoops. Where am I? Here. All right, let's go to the universalizability. Oh, before that, let's go to example. What time is it, by the way? Ooh. Suppose I'm a compulsive gambler who's constantly in debt. One night I go to the tables and recruit my losses, only to dig myself in further in the hole. The casino boss is having his men drop by tonight to collect. I can either pay them or have my kneecaps broken. I know which one I'd prefer. The problem is I don't have the money. The bank won't lend me anymore, and I don't have anyone to turn to but you. Who, me? Oh my gosh, it's talking to me in the book. Hold on, I'm coming. Since you're aware of my reputation, oh, your reputation, not mine. I know the only way to get money is by lying to you. So I beg and plead and promise it. I feel like this is something students would do to me about grades. But not all of you, but those other students. By all I hold dear, I promise you that I will repay you, even though I have no intention of doing so. I've just made what Kant says a lying promise. It seems clear that what I'm about to do is immoral, and that it is true even if, though a minor miracle, I then feel so much guilt that I repent of my ways, transform myself, and make the lie turn out for the best in the end. The morality of the action doesn't depend on the results, but on the maxim. My maxim here is not universalizable. That's the idea. Here's why. Lie to a friend in order to escape from being hurt. That would be the maxim. Now, suppose everybody acts on that maxim. They lie whenever they think that it is necessary to avoid some personal harm. In that situation, no one would trust the promise of others. Without trust, people could not achieve the goals they are aiming for in their promises. And in a world where there is no one believe the promise of others, I'd never be able to make money from you with my promise. And so the purpose of my promise would be defeated. So interesting. You almost had me thinking that, but that sounds like it's based on the effects, right? But then he switches it, right? He gets you to think about it rationally, right? Okay, but in a world in that way, I couldn't rationally actually achieve my goals, and I want this principle that I act on to do so. So it's not about the consequences, but me holding to my maxim, which may have to do with obviously things that I want, like giving money or something like that. But the reason isn't based on that. It would still be true regardless of the consequences. And so my maxim in that case, I lie, right, is not universalizable because I couldn't imagine a world in which that's the case. And therefore, my action is immoral. Okay, morality and rationality. Kant thought that if we act on a maxim that can't be universalizable, then we're being inconsistent. So again, it sounds like it has to do with the consequences. They might be part of our factor, but it's the reason, it's the maxim, and we're being inconsistent. And reason says, as he thinks, You should not be inconsistent. In other words, we're being what? Irrational. Law and reason and rules are rationality. It has nothing to do with it's not the consequences that determine it, and it's not your feelings. It's not putting yourself, how would you feel? It has to be, don't be irrational and be rational. And here is the rational explanation. When the maxim's universalizable. Kant thought that whenever we act wrongly, we are acting irrational. But remember my question. What about consistency and morality? What if they're two different categories? I need to see this bridge. I might intuitively think that, but what's your reason for it, Con? What's the connection between morality and rational? In other words, why ought I to be consistent? Why ought I, those are moral words, be rational? How do the two fit together? And we'll pick up on that. Have I assigned chapter 12 yet?
Yes.
Then I want you to read chapter 13. Don't forget to sign your participation sheet. And thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Made by Jim Bob. Everybody read and made by Jim Bob. Thank you.
Thank you.